Hello, and welcome to my full show review of WWE Bash in Berlin that took place last night. I'm going to jump right into it with the opening match of the main show. I didn't watch the pre-show. I don't know if there's any matches on it. There usually aren't. Let me know in the comments if there were. The first match of the main show was Kevin Owens challenging Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship. This match built nicely from, them being respectful, shaking hands, having a bit of a back and forth, etc., etc. at first, up to going a bit more all out on each other, reasonably quickly, and I think the escalation was done quite well by the two. I mean, it should be, shouldn't it? It's Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes. It was always going to be good. Cody did indeed tweak his bad knee that Kevin Owens told him he knew about on SmackDown. I think he was going for the double jump Cody cutter. He was doing some sort of springboard in the corner. I think that's what he was going for, if I remember correctly. But Owens was reluctant to capitalize. Was lining up a chop block, but then instead sort of sent the referee to check. He did eventually attack the knee on the outside, I believe, but he then declined to do the apron powerbomb on Cody. So a big part of the story of this match was how, I guess, Kevin Owens was not willing to be that old Kevin Owens that betrayed Sami Zayn in NXT and has done and attacked Chris Jericho during the Festival of Friendship, that ruthless Kevin Owens. He just wasn't willing to be that guy against his friend Cody Rhodes, and it cost him. He eventually lost the match after taking a crossroads. I think Rhodes kicked out of maybe two. Why do I remember him kicking out of two stunners, which is crazy. I feel like Kevin Owens has been shifting back to the pop-up powerbomb as his proper finisher, which I'm a fan of because I don't love Owens' stunner, and I don't love other people using the stunner, to be honest. I feel like that should just be left where it was. I know that Austin probably approved it personally. That's fine, but I can still have my opinion on it as well, which is that I'm not a fan of other people using the stunner. And I also really like the pop-up powerbomb. I think it's a great finisher, and it always looked really good when Owens does it. There was no heel turn by Owens during the match, and there wasn't a heel turn after the match either. I thought after the match was the perfect time to do it. After being a nice guy had proven to not be good enough, and being a good friend cost him the title potentially. I felt like the turn made sense there. There's still time to do it on SmackDown, I put here, but it really felt like after the match was the place to do it. Maybe not during the match, maybe show the tendencies during the match, but not pull the trigger, and then because it cost him, because he was probably never going to win the title here, but it costing him could have resulted in, that's it, he can now turn heel. But they did not pull the trigger. Cody Rhodes won. I think pretty much everyone knew that Cody Rhodes was going to win. I don't think that was the point. I think the point was the story. And I think that's the case with a lot of Triple H era PLEs, is they're not always necessarily super unpredictable, but it's all about telling that longer, bigger story, which people criticize wrestling for being quite predictable, but my opinion is quite often you go watching the Batman movie knowing that Batman's going to win in the end. But it's not about that. It's about the story. It's about the twists and turns and the progression. And I know it's cliche for, to use the term cinema for WWE because loads of people are using it at the moment, especially relating to Bloodline stuff. And I know Vince used to say, we don't do wrestling, we make movies. But in a way, and I'm not agreeing with either of those sentiments necessarily, but in a way, if you approach each individual wrestling match as a little miniature movie that's trying to tell you a story of conflict, and maybe the build is the prequel, so it's so it's a sequence of movies. I think it's then less important if the outcomes of any particular matches are predictable. I think that matters less if you approach it more as a viewing experience rather than watching a sports game where, anything can happen. The underdogs can always sneak a win. I just think that's certainly how I approach it these days, and I prefer it. And I seem, And, I'm not judging anyone, but I seem to be happier watching wrestling than a lot of people who complain about it being predictable all the time. So what can you do? Anyway, next match was the Women's Tag Team Championship match. Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill challenging... obviously, they're the former champions challenging the newish champions, Alba Fyre and Isla Dawn. This was a fine tag match. I don't have a lot to say about the actual match itself. Like I say, it was fine. I will say, though, Belair and Cargill winning does nothing for anyone involved. It makes Fyre and Dawn look weak because they didn't even beat Belair and Cargill to win the belts, and now immediately, first time of asking, they've just won them back. It keeps Belair and Cargill locked in this tag vortex they've been in, which they both seem happy in, having watched the post-show press conference. They both seem happy at the moment. But, like... there's a lack of storyline advancement going on. And I know Triple H likes to book things slow, let them breathe, as it were, like the A's in Fandango. But to be honest, it feels sometimes like things move too slowly. Like the critique of WWE storytelling, it's definitely gotten a lot better. Like, in the Triple H era. But I think if there were anything to criticise about it, for me, personally, it would be the pacing of things actually developing. Like, some stories, it's great to take your time, let it all breathe. The Bloodline is an excellent example of that, right? But not every story needs to move at that same glacial pace. Some of them can be really quick fire, and some of them short, and the contrast will make each thing stand out more in the minds of the fans, rather than fans just being like, oh, maybe I don't need to watch for 6 months. If all I care about is Jade and Bianca splitting up, maybe I can just skip forward 6 months, and then watch it in time for Mania, because that's probably going to happen in time for Mania, right? It's I don't know. It's the one criticism I really have. Someone on YouTube, I can't remember who, otherwise I'd credit them, made the joke, I saw it a few months ago, that the women's tag titles exist to give international crowds title change to cheer. And yeah, they changed hands at the most recent Clash at the Castle, Backlash France, and obviously here, which were all international shows. And I don't recall any other titles changing hands in any of those shows or the other Clash at the Castle in 2022. Obviously, Saudi shows get real title changes because money! But, yeah, generally, it seems to be the case that these titles just change hands on international shows just for the sake of it, because there does seem to definitely be a pattern there. I do think, even if this was on US soil, Jade and Bianca were winning anyway. But, yeah, not a big fan of this. I'd love to see Jade and Bianca implode sooner than it seems they're going to, because, again, it just seems like it's moving very glacially, and there was opportunities to make little advancements. There doesn't have to be any tension yet. They've not even started off doing the miscommunication, for example, between them. This match could have been an opportunity for one bit of miscommunication. Bam! That really impressive double finisher that Fyre and Dawn have, that Jade saved Bianca from. Would have been great if there had been a bit of miscommunication that led to Jade being out of the ring, and they actually got the pin there because Jade couldn't get back in time. Not because she refused to, not because they fell out and she walked away. Just, they tried something, Bianca knocked Jade off the apron or out of the ring, and Bianca slid back in and tried to break it up and just fell a foot short. Would have been a good story, for example. A good story beat. But, I'm nitpicking. I just think, the first two matches both had real opportunities for a bit of story advancement that they just didn't take. So up next was the strap match, Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. They used green and red lights. And my first thought when they announced this was like, could they not have picked any colour combination other than the most common type of colour blindness? It's like red-green colour blindness is like the Brad Pitt of colour blindness. It's the most famous one by a mile, right? And that's because I assume most people suffer with it. I'm not colourblind, but that immediately jumped into my mind of all the people involved, of the wrestlers, of the crew setting it up, of the people purchasing the lights or renting them or whatever they did, the people responsible for transporting them, like the people making the decision in the first place, not one of those people was like, why don't we use two colours that don't clash for colour blindness as much? You know, like, I don't know, just a small thought on that, which would be, it'd have been a little bit more accessible to more people had they not used red and green. Anyway, Drew jumped Punk before the match. Punk turned it around, but then he refused to take the early win because obviously these two hate each other. And I like this. It bugs me in wrestling when people build this huge dramatic blood feud, and then within like a few minutes of the match they're going for pins off like clotheslines, or they're doing like a roll up or something like that, and it's like, don't you want to inflict some punishment first? Like, you hate this person. Shouldn't these two people be not even trying to win the match for like 10 minutes because they're too busy fighting? They're too busy like beating the hell out of each other. Like, you know, that makes more sense to me. So I liked that. That was a good moment. Punk got busted open. I'll be honest, I wasn't looking when Punk got busted open. I didn't see if it was like hard way or an obvious blade, or what the deal was there. So let me know in the comments what happened with Punk getting busted open. But if it was a blade or a deliberate hard way, or if it was planned in the match, maybe not a deliberate hard way. I don't support deliberate hard way. But if it was a blade, I'm not a big fan of blood anyway. I think we've moved past the need for that, but it's impactful when it's used very sparingly. Like WWE, off the top of my head, have had Cody bleed during that Rock segment, and Punk bleed here, and I think maybe one other person, and it's so much more impactful when it's not used all the time. AEW have got better at that, by the way. There used to be blood everywhere all the time in AEW, and now it seems to be being used a lot more sparingly, and it's much more impactful in my opinion. So yeah, blood, look, if the performer's fine with it and it's their idea, the one who's bleeding, it's their idea, and they're doing it because they're so committed to telling a very personal, very vicious story, you know, it's not my place to tell them not to. I just don't think it's actually needed. But it still wakens something in you, doesn't it, when you see someone bleeding? You're like, oh, especially in WWE where they never do it hardly. It's like, oh, this just got serious. It feels more real, you know, which is what the Punk Drew feud is all about, is feeling real, right? Drew at one point got 3 corners and Punk left the ring on the far side and then just like pulled Drew over to the corner, and Drew very kindly ducked down and headbutted a chair for him. But it was a cool way, minus the chair spot, it was a cool way for Punk to stop Drew winning, was to just put himself further away from the corner than the length of the strap. Like, pretty good. There was the classic spot where Drew's carrying Punk around, tagging the turnbuckles, and then Punk's tagging them after. I think Crime Time did this once. I can't remember who else has done this over the years. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, it's a good spot. But someone did point out that the rules seem to be you have to touch the corners uninterrupted. Now, one could argue that Drew hitting a corner is fine, his light goes on. But then when Punk hits that same corner, that's interrupted Drew's progression, right? He's no longer the only one doing anything. He's no longer touching all the corners in succession. But then again, you could also argue the finish was very much interrupted. So, you know, we'll get to that. But like, so they're a little bit liberal with those rules. I'm not a huge fan of the touch the corners strap match rules anyway. I think strap matches would be much more effective if it was pin or submission. But, you know, it's something a bit different, so whatever. But yeah, they did that thing, and then they ended up fighting over the 4th corner, and then eventually they ended up fighting so much that the lights reset, and we carried on. Now, Punk had the match won, and right, I was writing my notes as it was happening on my phone, and I've written here, and I'm going to read it out verbatim. Punk had match won, went for another GTS, takes bracelet, then wins. And the reason I've written it so sort of janky is each sort of beat there, each phrase, each clause of the sentence, each comma represents me expecting to write after it, and it cost him. And it cost him, and it cost him. And it didn't. I fully expected Punk deciding to go back for another GTS and then deciding that taking the bracelet was the most important thing rather than winning the match was going to cost him another match against Drew. And that was the story they were telling, was that Punk can't beat Drew because Drew's actually in Punk's head. But no, instead, he did win, and it was just like a really dominant end to the match. Like, the match itself was very back and forth, but the finish was like GTS touch some corners, GTS take the bracelet, I don't know, have a little nap, eat a 3-course meal, have some bratwurst, and then go and touch the final corner. Like, it felt like Punk absolutely decimated Drew at the end of that match, which I was surprised it was like that dominant of a win condition. That's the only thing that it's not the only thing that surprised me. I thought there was a good chance Drew could win this match as well, because like I say, the story being told up to that point seemed to be Drew had Punk's number because of the bracelet, because of the mind games. Anyway, I put when he paused after 3 corners, I was sure he'd lose, but it was a very decisive win. And then they're going on about it being like 10.5 years without a win. But when Punk returned and he had that, I think it was an MSG, right? The house show match against Dom. They advertised it loads online. I believe they talked about it a load on TV. And I believe they talked about the fact that Punk had won it on TV. And again, certainly online on social media. And, like, I watched that match because WWE uploaded it, I assume, to YouTube. I assume WWE uploaded it, unless I watched some fan cam of it, but I don't think it was that. But now that didn't happen, and he's not won in 10.5 years. Like, it's okay not to acknowledge house shows as canonical. Certainly not in terms of win-loss records. I get that, because that would be really jarring. Like, think about the Goldberg WCW streak that was jumping up several numbers per week just because they wanted to buff out the numbers. But to promote something so heavily on your own social medias, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe even their own TV, only to then be like, no, that never happened, Punk's not had a win in 10.5 years, just seems weird. Like, it just seems weird, and it seems quite old WWE of them to like be revising history that much, and that recent history as well. Like, it's not like they're erasing something that happened 10 years ago on a house show. It's like less than a year ago. But anyway, next match, Dominic Mysterio and Liv Morgan versus Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. I put this as a surprisingly even match before the Judgment Day shenanigans. Like, yes, Rhea and Priest were clearly the stronger duo and were dominating a lot of the action, but Liv and Dominic were using their sneaky, underhanded tactics to get some offense in, you know, to build some momentum, as the saying goes on commentary. But yeah, Dom and I was gonna say Dom and Rhea. That's not even a pair. Damian and Rhea were clearly like the stronger duo. The double razor's edges were cool. Rhea whooping Dom was cool. I think that's the best opportunity and the most likely opportunity WWE have had in a long time to do an intergender match and it work within their parameters of why they don't want to do intergender stuff. Do you know what I mean? Because Rhea can basically whoop Dom all over the place, and Dom get barely any offense in, if any. Like, certainly, like, if they want to be really careful with it, no striking and stuff, he can do like a Hurricane Rana or something, and Rhea can just get straight back up and stick her tongue out and then run at him and maul him some more. Like, you know, they can do something like that. I don't know. It feels like that's the only satisfying conclusion to this story, is that Rhea eventually does get her hands on Dom one-on-one. I've seen people pitching for it to be like Hell in a Cell. That'd be great. I think that'd be phenomenal. I think that'd be so much fun. And it'd be history. They love doing their first evers, right? First ever intergender Hell in a Cell match. Got a ring to it. Anyway, so yeah, that could happen, and it's the most likely intergender match to happen. Whether it will ever happen because of sponsors and toy companies and all that stuff, maybe not. But it's the most likely it's ever, well, not ever been, because obviously it's happened before. It's the most likely it's been since the last time it happened, I would argue. Like, since the last time they had an outright intergender match, which was probably, I don't know what was more recent. Was it like Jericho Chyna, or was it Vince Stephanie? Like, but since then, like, it's probably like never been closer to happening, honestly. Anyway, Judgment Day interfered, obviously, because of course they did, and then the Terror Twins overcome a 5-on-2 disadvantage, which makes them look great. Don't get me wrong. I'm very impressed with how Priest has lost the world title and not even gone and got an instant rematch, but stayed feeling like world champion Damian Priest in terms of like his aura and how good he feels, what his overall feels like it is, to put it in like WWE 2K terms. Like, because quite often when like a one and done champion, which Priest probably is, let's be real, probably a one-time world champion in WWE, and I mean that going forward, he's probably retiring as a one-time world champion. But sometimes the fall-off is so immediate, and they drop back down the card, and they're suddenly losing matches to people that would never win the world title, so they've dropped dramatically. But this doesn't feel like that. It feels like they're keeping him up there. Like, yeah, he's further down the card in terms of what he's currently doing, but his feel is still world champion Damian Priest. Like, he still feels as good as he was when he was world champion, which I think is rare and is credit to the storytelling. Rhea Ripley, obviously, is amazing as well. I feel like Liv comes out of all of these interactions feeling very weak for the women's world champion, but you can put most of the blame on the male members of the Judgment Day, because at the end of the day, Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley are 1v1, and Rhea sometimes takes out some of the male members, but they don't attack Rhea for the reasons discussed before about intergender stuff. So she's dealing with Rhea one-on-one. Damian Priest wiping the floor with 4 male members of the Judgment Day on a regular basis at the moment. So it makes them look strong, but it makes the Judgment Day look weak AF, I put. Which, I don't care if JD don't Google me looks weak. I don't care. And I don't care if Carlito looks weak. Not because I don't like Carlito. I do like Carlito. I always did like Carlito. It's just Carlito's not... He's not been there, and he's come back, and he's not been positioned as a top guy. You know, and it's fine. And Dom is that cowardly chicken poo heel that's just... It's always gonna be booked a bit like that because he's a small wiry kid, isn't he? You know, with a mullet and a mustache. Like just that's fine. Finn Balor, on the other hand, should feel on Damian's level, and he just currently doesn't, because he's part of that foursome who are getting wiped by Damian on a regular basis. So like, yeah. Anyway, Rhea pinned Liv with her very interesting pin. Let me know in the comments who you'd rather swap places with, Rhea or Liv. But yeah, the important thing is she pinned the world champion, so the rematch gotta be incoming, right? Like, for the world title. Again, tell the story more quickly. You can always come back round to it if you want to do that match at Mania as well. But don't drag this out until Mania. Like, make it 2 separate stories. Like, make it this story gets concluded, and then in time for Mania, it starts up again. Like, you know, the slow storytelling. I'm a bit concerned that they're going to drag this all the way to Mania. And, like, they could drag it out another couple of months because they could do Rhea Dom first. But, yeah, they've got to finish this by, I'd say, Survivor Series. Like, yeah. I'd say Survivor Series is your stop point. Anyway, main event time. Randy Orton versus Gunther, and my goodness, the crowd were a bit into this one, weren't they? They were singing before the fight, and Randy Orton was, like, applauding them. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if this is from somewhere else. They did Scooter, Maria, I Like It Loud. Is Scooter even German? I didn't bother Googling it, but, like, is Gunther even German? Like, you know, they clearly don't care that much. It's just, oh, you're close enough. But yeah, is Scooter German? Anyway, but yeah, they were doing the that's from Maria, I Like It Loud. I love that song. So, like, yeah, they were having a blast. There was a Mexican wave that Randy Orton joined in with. The crowd were just having a party, like, honestly, before this match really kicked off. Like, the bell rang, and then the crowd just took over for, like, genuinely a good couple, maybe even a few minutes, where the wrestlers did nothing, except Orton was joining in with the crowd a bit, like, applauding them, doing the Mexican wave with them, stuff like that. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed Randy Orton. Randy Orton these days is so incredibly comfortable in what he does and in his legacy. No pun intended, because obviously legacy. The group he led. But like he's just so he's just enjoying himself, and I think it's delightful to watch. Honestly, like, I love it. Anyway, in this match, he did end up working heel. Like, he wasn't getting, like, booed out of the building or anything. There was a lot of respect from the crowd. There was a lot of dueling chants for both of them, which really surprised me. They weren't that partisan. Like, they were massively behind Gunther, but they weren't against Orton. Like, by any stretch. But obviously it made sense for him to work heel. He was targeting the right arm, except sometimes when he was targeting the left, because I guess he forgot or something. Oops. He got booed a bit when he thumbed Gunther in the eye, and Michael Cole reprimanded him for it on commentary. And I'm like, mate, every single match in the US, Randy Orton does that thumb to the eye, and then the cheeky little smile to the camera, like, well, what do you expect? You know, I'm a bad guy at heart. Kind of shtick. And Cole usually is like, oh, classic Randy, look, oh, that cheeky guy. But now that he's supposed to be the heel in Berlin, suddenly it's a bad thing. He did it just for one night, and then next time he does it, it'll be fine again. Like, it's just nonsense. Like, you don't need to turn all the dynamic. You can just have the crowd turn and change the actual who dominates the grindy part of the match a bit. You don't have to change, like, how commentators talk about them. Like, Michael Cole doesn't have to suddenly disapprove of something he's laughed at. He always has a chuckle at Randy Orton doing that. And now it's like, oh, you could get disqualified. Oh, naughty, bad man. I don't know. Anyway, I made a note here. Gunther is a superb seller. I think, I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like this is my perception. And certainly my experience personally is I forget, and I think a lot of people forget, how good at selling Gunther is. Like, people know how great Gunther is, but I think when I think of how great Gunther is, I think of Gunther on offense mostly, and how real it all seems, and how he changed stuff together, and how many different ways he's got to finish in matches, and how compelling he is when he's on offense. But his selling, and I think maybe he just doesn't get the opportunity to demonstrate it so much because he's usually working heel, and he's a very dominant style of heel. So he gets to sell during matches, but not to this extent. And I think and I think it's fair to say we, as a community, forget how damn good at selling Gunther is. But yeah, he was tremendous in this. He failed 3 times to hit a powerbomb on Randy Orton because his arm wouldn't allow him to lift it, eventually landing it on the 4th attempt, but only got a 2. Orton then got an RKO for a 2, and then Orton went real slow and methodical. Like, I had to check my WWE Network settings to make sure I hadn't accidentally slowed it down to 0.5 times speed or something, because Orton took about 5 minutes to move the ring steps from the corner to in front of the announce table, which is, about 6 feet. And he genuinely took multiple minutes, probably about 5, I didn't time it, but probably about 5 minutes to do that, which was crazy. I guess maybe something had gone short, or they'd rushed through to that point in the match too quick, and the ref was like, "Yeah, you need to drag this one out a bit, Randall. Drag it out a bit." But he set up the full set of steps. He'd done his classic belly to back sort of throw onto the table a few times on Gunther before on the English announce table. But then he set the steps up next to the German one and climbed up the steps and belly to back belly to back suplex throw through Gunther through the German announce table. And then just didn't capitalize, just stood on the steps doing the Randy Orton pose, strolling around. I genuinely feel like they were going to finish early or something, and they just couldn't have that. I wasn't really clock watching. I was watching on a very slight delay as well, because it was only like half an hour into the show that I remembered it was happening right there and then. For some reason, my brain had switched the start time by an hour. So I was half an hour late to the show, so I was watching it on delay, so there was no point in really clock watching. But yeah, I feel like maybe they were just going to finish too early. One thing I want to mention here is how many Oasis references Wade Barrett chucked into the show. I heard 3, but I feel like there might have been more, because the first one I heard was during the mixed tag, and I feel like he'd been doing it all night, so let me know in the comments. But I heard him say Rhea should advising Rhea to don't look back in anger. I heard him talking about the champ having to roll with it, and I heard something about slide away during this match as well. What others did I miss? Because, like, on a day where I genuinely had a friend messaging me all day about how she was waiting, like, she was trying to get Oasis tickets. Genuinely from, like, 8 in the morning UK time till we lost contact at night because I assumed she fell asleep, like, at, like, maybe 10 o'clock at night. Like, genuinely was still queuing the last I heard. And having a miserable time of it. Wade Barrett's chucking in Oasis puns. Like, like, and I don't even know if anyone got it. I don't even know, like, Michael Cole never acknowledged them, but I think that might be because Michael Cole didn't get them. Like, because I'm not sure how big Oasis are in America. And how big the news is of them coming back. So if he'd really associate Wade Barrett saying things in a certain way to do with that. But anyway, the cheeky man chucking in all those Oasis references. It tickled me though. So back in the ring, Gunther locks in the sleeper eventually. Orton again goes after the bad arm and manages to prise it off and slowly hooks his arm backwards around Gunther's neck. And suddenly they're in sort of the world's slowest ever RKO position. Because normally it's like jump, grab, drop. But this was like properly like, oh, I've got you. Now I could just jump and drop, right? But then Gunther went back into the sleeper and was dropping like those anvil elbows, you know, those elbows onto the side of the neck and shoulder area. But and then locked the sleeper back in. Orton lifted Gunther up and dropped backwards and slammed him down. But then Gunther, you know, sat back up and grabbed Orton and fell back and locked in the leg grapevine. Hit more elbows, reapplied the sleeper, and then Orton passed out for the win. It was a really good finish. It was a really good finish because it was like, it demonstrated Orton's never say die attitude and his tenacity and all the good traits you want in a main event babyface. But it never really made it look like he was actually getting out of Gunther's grasp, so it really put over how good Gunther is at applying that move as well. If that makes sense. Like, every time he got out, Gunther had a way to get it back in. Like, really instantly. Like, again, showing that tenacity. So, yeah, I really like the finish and how they played it out, where it wasn't just, like, sleeper pass out, done, sleeper tap, done. It was, like, I think 3 applications of the sleeper, but Orton was never fully clear either. Yeah, I really liked it. Obviously, Gunther was winning this match. Like, obviously Gunther was winning. Obviously, the Terror Twins were winning. Obviously, unless they did some interesting story beat, Cargill and Belair were winning back the tag titles. Obviously, Cody was winning. Most people probably thought Punk was winning. I would probably, if I'd have done formal predictions for this, have picked Punk, but I would have definitely been unsure of this and deliberating maybe Drew could win. So, like, but overall, I think the results were fairly predictable. But again, like I said at the start, that's not the point, in my opinion. That's not the point. If you want something unpredictable, go watch, like, real sport. Like, you know, where it's like, you know, 22 men go out, 11 on each team, and both are genuinely trying to win. And even if one team is notably better than the other, they still have off days. This team will be, you know, tactically prepared to play a better team, etc., etc. Or American football, or basketball, or baseball, or cricket, or tennis, or snooker, or darts. Like, there's so many options to watch where you don't know what the outcome's going to be going in. Wrestling's entertainment. Like, I'm not taking away from their abilities as athletes, their toughness as individuals, as human beings. Are some of the toughest people on the planet. Some of the injuries some of those people work through and finish matches with, and, you know, Triple H tearing his quad off the bone, and Cody Rhodes wrestling Hell in a Cell with a torn pec, and, you know, the examples like that are borderline endless in wrestling history and WWE history, but it's still not a legitimate contest, so it is still easier to predict than a legitimate contest, right? So, if that's your only complaint about wrestling, maybe wrestling's just not for you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, because it's just lots of fun to experience these 2 people crafting, or these 4 people, or however many, crafting a story together for our entertainment. And I love it. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the predictability argument. Like, you know, I'm not here to tell anyone stop watching wrestling. Obviously, I'm saying that a bit hyperbolically, that it's, like, not for you. But, like, genuinely, Like, try if you try and shift how you view wrestling to be a bit more about like just enjoying the experience, enjoying the story that's being told, rather than I must be shocked by things at least once per show. What match there do you shock people with? Do you have Orton beat Gunther? Do you have Kevin Owens beat Cody Rhodes? I mean, that'd be my vote, honestly. Well, no, my vote would probably be Alba Fire and Nyla Dawn. But I'd love to see Owens win the world title. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Kevin Owens. So if you said there has to be a shock on the show, like a real shock, they'd be the ones I went with. Like one of them two, or maybe even both. But there doesn't have. That's the point. There doesn't have to be a shock result. So Anyway, my closing paragraph in my notes that I just wrote after the final match had finished was fun show, no big surprises except maybe the nature of the finish of Punk Drew, because I think the decisiveness of it, like the way Punk really mauled Drew for that last couple of minutes, was a bit surprising to me. But still a good show. Disappointing lack of advancement in the first two matches, but otherwise no notes, meaning no criticisms. Like, I think that was my only gripe, was just there was a couple of opportunities for minor story beats, or even a major one with Kevin Owens, and they just didn't take it. And I'm interested to see where they go from there. Like, I have faith in this incarnation of WWE and the stories they're telling. I do feel like if there's one criticism I would personally give them, it's the speed at which they tell stories. Is always the same speed, and it's always slow, and there's no harm in it sometimes being a bit faster. That's my only thoughts. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new here. Share with your friends, etc, etc. It'd be greatly appreciated. But for now, all I have left to say is thank you very much for watching. As always, I've been Ebeza. You've been amazing, and I'll see you next time.